Over the past few years, the issue of trafficking has really come to light. Even now, there seems to be a new wave of awareness spreading across our nation. People are realizing that this crime, this injustice, is actually happening in their own communities. The positive thing about awareness is that it oftentimes leads to action.
There are a few different statistics regarding the magnitude of trafficking in our world today. Some say there are 27 million victims worldwide, others 32, while others 19 million. Regardless of the exact number, the fact remains that there are millions of individuals currently being trafficked.
When people hear these numbers for the first time, their first question to us is often, if there are millions of individuals currently being trafficked, where are they? How is this horrific crime seemingly taking place right under our noses in our own communities? See, we've noticed that thankfully, the majority of people who become aware that trafficking exists want to also learn to recognize and report it so that victimization can stop and restoration can begin.
We're about to take you around the cities we work in throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We'll be sharing a glimpse into our experience working in these areas, as well as begin to answer questions such as, where are women being trafficked here? What does it look like when we rescue her, empower a survivor to live in freedom? And lastly, what can you do in your own community to be a part of the solution?
If you're watching this and you're not local to DFW, we still encourage you to continue to tune in. Take the information we share and apply it to where you currently live.
Remember, it's okay if you walk away from watching this with more questions than answers. Trafficking is a complex topic, and we're just sharing a brief glimpse of that complexity. So come along with us as we take you around DFW and share a bit about our experience in response to sex trafficking in our city.
We're starting today by going to a motel in Fort Worth that used to be on one of our motel outreach routes when we were doing motel outreaches. And our experience working with motels is actually what led us to launch our 24/7 crisis response hotline in the first place. And it's really impacted how we respond to crisis calls, as well as some of the things that we do in our Empower program. Because many of the survivors that we've worked with have at one point or another been exploited in motels and or hotels. So it was important for our staff to really understand the victimization that was taking place at these locations so that we could best assist the survivors in our program.
We began doing motel outreaches around 2014, and our goal was to equip the staff of motels and hotels with the education and the resources and the tools they need to recognize and report instances of trafficking happening in their motels. Motels are a hotspot for trafficking, and we were seeing a rise in traffickers using websites and other online platforms to sell victims. The communications between traffickers and buyers were taking place online, but then there was a need for a physical place for the actual exploitation to happen.
Now, before we go on, it's important to note that trafficking doesn't just happen in like your stereotypical low-end seedy motels. Trafficking also happens in high-end hotels as well. And that's because trafficking really is about demand and about profit for the traffickers. So, for example, if you have a high-end businessman who is going to victimize somebody, they're not necessarily going to pay $2,000 to exploit someone at a low-end seedy motel. They're gonna pay $2,000 to exploit someone at a high-end, downtown Dallas hotel after their business conference, so to speak. So I do just want to clarify that although today we'll be talking mostly about the more individually owned low-end motels, trafficking definitely can happen in a wide range from low-end to high-end establishments. We're stopping at this motel specifically because when we were doing outreaches here, we would get several calls from guests and from management regarding potential instances of trafficking. So we would be really intentional with the guests here in training and equipping them to recognize and report trafficking to our hotline.
So today we actually won't be sharing any of the names or specific details of any of the places that we'll be visiting, because we know from our experience that trafficking actually happens everywhere and at many different locations, and we want you guys to really focus on why trafficking is happening and the root behind it, as opposed to fixating on the specific place and location that we're at.
Yeah, so like Courtney said, you'll notice that later on when we go to places like strip clubs or other hotels or massage parlors, we're not necessarily focused on that specific location that we'll be sharing about, but our hope is to equip you guys with general knowledge and information so that whatever city that you're in, you can be able to recognize signs of trafficking at those motels in your area or those strip clubs in your area, not just this specific one in Fort Worth. Trafficking happens in motels really because of the high level of anonymity that motels offer traffickers. For example, a trafficker or a buyer can pay for a room in cash or prepaid credit card so that that transaction isn't tracked. There's so many motels and hotels all across the DFW area. So a trafficker might move their victim from place to place to place all in one night so that a victim really can't keep track of where she is or can't stay in a location long enough to make an outcry or to wait for law enforcement to respond. And also, if you can see here, there's open parking lots, and when we're here at night, we'll see a lot of activity in these parking lots. Not all negative activity either, just, normal residents coming in and, congregating in the parking lot if it's a nice evening, coming in and out of their rooms. And so the activity of trafficking can oftentimes go overlooked because it's in the midst of all of this other activity.
As we head to our next motel, we wanted to answer a question that we get asked a lot. People want to know, as a guest, what can they be looking for at a motel or hotel that could potentially indicate another guest is being trafficked?
And some of the main pointers that we give people are, if there's another guest there who doesn't know where she is, if she can't identify, hey, I'm in Dallas or I'm in Arlington or I'm in Fort Worth. So if she doesn't know where she is, if she doesn't know how she got there, if she doesn't know how long she's staying there or where she is going to next. Those are indicators that she may be a potential trafficking victim. Other indicators are if a guest checks into a hotel with little to no luggage but plans on staying for multiple days, or if a string of men enter and leave a particular room, staying just for 30 minutes or an hour at a time. That could be an indicator as well. And lastly, if you notice that another guest's sleep patterns are completely switched, maybe staying up all night, sleeping all day, that could be an indicator too. Of course, just because you're seeing these things doesn't necessarily indicate trafficking, but what it should do is raise a red flag to you of, hey, I either need to investigate this further or bring this to the staff's attention or local law enforcement, that kind of thing. Which leads me to my next point about motels is, what do you do if you see something suspicious? Well, you can definitely call local law enforcement and report it. If you're local to the DFW area, you can call our crisis hotline, or if it's not an emergency, report a tip on our website, and we can help answer some questions or assess the situation further. And if you're not in the DFW area, you can always call the National Human Trafficking Hotline and report to them as well. After we launched our 24/7 crisis hotline in 2017, we began to get more calls from guests themselves, not just calls from motel staff. So we started to shift our focus of our motel outreaches to be more guest-centered than simply focused on training and equipping staff themselves.
Yeah, so what some of those outreaches looked like is we would show up every single Friday night at different motels and we would serve dinner, we would have yard games, and the whole night would solely be focused on just connecting with the guests at the motel. Since we shifted to a more guest-centered focus, we were interacting with women who were at risk for being trafficked or even being trafficked on a weekly basis. And so we met one lady, her name was Michelle, and we met her by going to this one specific motel every single Friday. We would give out dinner, we would hand out makeup with our hotline number on it, and we just built relationships. And over time, her abuser started letting her come downstairs to hang out with us and to eat, and her friend would come with her. And as we got to know her, we started to learn a little bit more about her situation and started to kind of realize that something was a little off there. And so she would come down every single week and we would just get to have a little bit more conversation each time and get to learn just more and more about what was going on. And so after about 6 months of consistently coming every single week, meeting a tangible need and just building that trust and relationship, and her knowing that we are going to show up when we say we're going to show up, she reached out to me personally and said, "Hey, I think I want to meet with you guys. I think I need help." So it took 6 months of us just continuing to build those relationships for her, for one girl to finally reach out. And so that is why we chose to do guest-centered outreach, is for that one girl and to be able to take her out of an abusive and horrible situation and show her that there is hope and there is restoration available for her.
What Courtney is sharing about building that relationship with Michelle for 6 months before Michelle reached out for help, we find that to be pretty true with a lot of the survivors that we work with, a lot of the women that we should respond to during crisis calls, that it really takes that time of relationship building to have that trust that's needed for a survivor to make an outcry or to accept help or to feel comfortable or safe receiving help from us. And so we wanted to point out a few key things about that story with Michelle that really kind of overlap into how we respond to crisis calls and how we work with survivors in our Empower program. So the first thing being that there was consistency. So consistency is so key to building trust with victims and survivors. Courtney mentioned that they would go, that our team would go every single Friday and serve dinner. So Michelle saw every single week for 6 months that Courtney would show up when she said she would show up and do what she came to do. And there was consistency so that when Michelle was ready to ask for help, she knew that, okay, if I ask Courtney for help, Courtney will do what she says she's going to do when she says she'll do it, and I can trust that. So consistency is so key to building trust.
Another key thing that we did is we met a tangible need. And so we assessed the community before we even decided which motel to go to and decided, okay, what is a need that they have that we could meet? And so at a lot of these motels, a lot of families live there. So we started by bringing dinner, which then brought Michelle down to come get food from us. And we were able to meet that need by providing food. And we meet this need also with the survivors in our program by providing groceries, transportation, and other just basic needs that they have to be able to really walk in their healing and live in freedom like we say that we want them to be able to do.
Exactly. And so with meeting a tangible need, like Courtney said, we asked what those needs were. So we didn't just assume, hey, they probably need dinner. We would ask Michelle, even, in serving dinner, hey, what else is it do you need? And when Michelle reached out for help, to Courtney asked, okay, well, what would be the best thing for you right now? So we're not coming from a place of assumption, because every single individual is different. So we want to know what their need is and how we can best meet that. And, lastly, there was always a choice in the matter for Michelle. So we never put a timeline on, okay, we're going to come here for a month, and if she comes down one more time, this is going to be the time she has to say she wants help. We were just there to offer the opportunity to help, but we left the choice in Michelle's hands about whether or not she took it. And choice is so key when we're working with survivors who are coming from being trafficked, where they really have had no choice and no options and no say in what they want to do and when they want to do it.
Yeah, and going off of that, with the choice, if there was ever a Friday night where Michelle didn't come down to get food or didn't come to see us, that didn't change if we would be willing to help her in the future.
Exactly. And it didn't change our response. It didn't change what we were offering or our availability or our desire to help. And really, that leads into the necessity of when we're responding to calls or working with survivors or assessing the needs of community, we have to keep in mind that there's a huge safety risk for women who are still being exploited to reach out for help. Courtney mentioned that Michelle's abuser would let her come down to eat dinner with us. And so if one week Michelle wasn't there, we didn't press her as to why she wasn't there or, go up and knock. We were very aware of all of the, of how to meet a tangible need in a safe way, not just for our staff, but especially for her, because it was a risk for her when she reached out for help. And obviously there's so many more details into how we went about doing this safely, but the key thing is that we were intentional about making sure that Michelle's safety was not compromised while we were offering opportunities to help her. We're headed to a street in Dallas called Harry Hines, and Harry Hines is pretty notorious for being a place where there's a lot of exploitation. It's normally been associated with prostitution, but we know now that a lot of what looks like prostitution is actually really trafficking, so pimp-controlled trafficking. And we're going here today to give you an idea of the different ways that women are exploited along Harry Hines. And this type of area is commonly referred to as the track, where there's a high level of exploitation. And so you'll be able to see that exploitation doesn't just look like how it's depicted in movies like Pretty Women. It's not always just women walking up and down the track, although that definitely does happen too. But there's motels, massage parlors, strip clubs, exploitation happening out of gas stations, a lot of different things like that. We're parked outside of a strip club where a girl who was in our program was being trafficked. And I wanted to share this story with you because it shares a unique situation of how she was coerced into trafficking. So this particular survivor, she moved to Dallas in hopes of furthering her education, getting a steady job, really settling down and planning roots. She had no money to start out with, but big goals and big dreams. So she started working at a strip club to quickly make money. Well, while she was working there, she met a guy who said, "Hey, I can help you manage your money well and connect you with higher paying clientele so that you can reach your goals quicker than without me." And this survivor is very business minded, very savvy, very goal oriented. So for her, this, proposal from this man sounded really great and really wise, a wise choice to make. So she said yes. And so this man started managing her money, managing her clients and all of that. And over time, over many, many months, the type of work that she was doing progressed from stripping at a strip club to way more sexual acts. And slowly, she also realized that her choice in the matter slowly disappeared. She shared with us that she realized after 4 or 5 months that all of a sudden she wasn't allowed to hold any of her money, to see any of her money, to spend anything, to know really even how much she made from a job that he set up for her. She wasn't allowed to make any phone calls by herself. She had to hand over all of her personal passwords, all of her identification documents. And it happened so slowly under the guise of, "Hey, let me help you manage your money and reach your goals," that she didn't even realize that her choice was taken from her. And one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, why do victims of trafficking sometimes say that trafficking was their choice? And the reality is that sometimes they don't realize when that choice was taken away from them, like in the instance of this survivor. As we said before, Harry Hines in Dallas is really a notorious area for being the track here, but you might be wondering, how do I recognize trafficking in other parts of the community? Or if you're in a different city, how can I recognize if trafficking is happening in my city? And one of the general ways that we tell people is to look for abnormalities in areas that you know. So what stands out apart from the norm, or what is an abnormal behavior that somebody is doing?
We just passed a pretty empty parking lot with a bunch of semi trucks parked nearby, and when we used to do outreach here on Harry Hines, there would be men sitting in these semi trucks for hours on end, and they would never get out of their cars, and the girls further away from the semi trucks would actually interact with us, whereas the girls who were nearby the semi trucks wouldn't talk to us, they wouldn't look at us, they were not allowed to interact with us. And so that's one of the ways that traffickers can seem to stay hidden, but that's also something that you guys can look out for, is just things that are very out of the ordinary. Like, why are these semi trucks not parked at a truck stop? Why are they parked in the middle of a busy street in a random parking lot near a strip club and nearby a bunch of girls walking the track? So that's something else that you guys can be aware of, is knowing what's normal in your area and your surroundings and being able to notice when things are abnormal.
Other places that may stick out as abnormal in your community are massage parlors. And obviously, not every massage parlor is a place where trafficking happens, but there are a few abnormal things to notice about massage parlors that could indicate that it's a place where trafficking is happening. For instance, many massage parlors where women are being exploited will have these neon lights on the outside, will have bars on the windows, will have very odd operating hours, so sometimes staying open until 2 or 3 in the morning. Another thing you might notice is that the parking lots become really full around lunchtime or around right after work hours, so like 5 or 6 p.m., because many times it's businessmen who are exploiting the women inside, and so they want to go during times that don't interfere with their family time, but that also kind of coincide with their work schedule availability. And we point all of these abnormalities out and things to recognize, not as just a blanket statement of, hey, if you see this, it means trafficking, but more so to say, hey, if you're seeing these things in your community, ask more questions, report tips to local law enforcement or the National Trafficking Hotline, or if you're in DFW, to us, so that we can investigate things further and see what is really happening in these at these locations that stand out from the ordinary.
As we finish taking you around DFW to show you places that are high risk for exploitation right here in our city, we want to end in a story of hope. We want to share a little bit about a woman we'll call Rachel. Rachel had been reaching out to a friend needing a safe place to stay, and her friend promised her that she had a safe place right here in Dallas. When Rachel arrived in Dallas, she quickly realized that her friend was being trafficked and was actually recruiting her. The trafficker ended up picking Rachel up from the bus station and brought her right here to this hotel. As you can see, this hotel's pretty nice and is a hotel that maybe you and I would stay in. And he had her get ready here in this hotel and then transported her to Harry Hines to be exploited. It was only about 3 days that she was exploited before someone was able to intervene. Rachel fled to a nearby restaurant and called a family friend from home. Her friend was able to call law enforcement and they intervened immediately. After intervening, they were able to call us and we were able to come right on the scene and meet with her and meet some of her basic needs that she had in the moment. We've worked with Rachel for a little over 1.5 years now, and although those 3 days of exploitation were horrific, we want to share that there is hope for restoration. Now, Rachel has a family of her own, she's in a safe place, she's rebuilt connections with her family members, and is now living in a place where she feels safe and where she's able to reach her goals and thrive. And we are so proud that we were able to walk through this with her so that she is now able to walk into freedom.
As Courtney shared, Rachel's story is one of restoration. Of course, she's had obstacles and hardships these past 2 years, but she's also had the support needed to work through these things and the opportunities to heal and grow. This is our hope for all the survivors we work with. See, our vision is to empower survivors of sex trafficking to live in freedom. Freedom means having choice and opportunity. We empower survivors by strengthening each woman's ability to choose, act, and change with confidence and with consistent support.
More specifically, we carry out our vision by raising awareness through speaking events, educational resources, and awareness campaigns. The information we share about trafficking has the potential to either empower or harm the very survivors we say we care about. We aim to share truth, to correct information if we're wrong, or learn new things, and to share about the survivors we work with in ways that uphold their inherent dignity and worth.
In addition to raising awareness, we also operate a 24/7 crisis hotline for adult victims of sex trafficking in DFW. We receive calls from local law enforcement, Homeland Security, hospitals, the National Trafficking Hotline, other nonprofit agencies, community members, and victims themselves. Our goal when we respond to a crisis call is to meet many of the vital needs victims have within the first 72 hours after being recovered. These include offering emotional support, assessing emergency needs, transportation to safe shelter, funds for emergency medical care, and crisis care coordination.
Lastly, we offer restorative services to survivors in our long-term Empower program. We focus on empowering survivors in 5 areas: legal, independent living, community, safe environment, and physical, emotional, and mental health. Each survivor is paired with a staff advocate and a volunteer mentor to offer emotional support, guidance, and assistance identifying and reaching goals. Because survivors are coming out of an exploitive and abusive community, we place a heavy emphasis on helping each survivor create a new, healthy community where they are accepted and can thrive.
As of September 2020, our 2 staff advocates are walking with 12 survivors of sex trafficking in our Empower program. While it is truly a privilege to walk with these 12, the sad reality is that there are many other women who do not yet have a safe place to heal and be empowered.
In the month of August, we had 3 new survivors reach out to us for help, and we had to say no to each one of them because we simply did not have the staff or the financial means necessary to say yes.
When a survivor has the courage to reach out for help, we want our answer to always be yes. Yes, we are here for you. Yes, you are accepted here. Yes, there is hope. Yes, we have the time, finances, and staff needed to empower you to live in freedom. Will you help be a part of changing our no to a yes by donating today to help us create a safe space for more survivors of trafficking to heal and thrive? See, we believe that every survivor is capable, is worthy, and has a future worth fighting for. If you believe that too, we invite you to make a donation to rescue her today to support the futures of survivors of sex trafficking right here in DFW. Together, we can empower survivors to live in freedom.